Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Coach Timmy and today we're going to be bringing you another episode of On the Brink. We'll be talking about Liquid Scoped, Tragics and Ceice and the way that they just fell 1 point short on the weekend in FNCS semi-finals. So if you look through their match history here, again trying to give it a little bit of context, we see that game one they struggle. I had a watch of this game and honestly it came down to the fact that they dilly-dallied a little bit at first zone. So to me, not a hugely interesting game. Game 3 here, played as a duo because they took an unnecessary fight. Nothing interesting there for me. But Game 3, I think there's some awesome stuff that we can talk about. So let's get in depth with it. Let's find out why Tragic, Scoped, and Ceice were on the brink. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the disengage that they make off spawn. Beautifully done by Ceice. I think it's a really good decision because if you look down the bottom right here, you'll see that there are two other teams in retail that they'd be forced to fight, but there's also a team further north. So by doing this, they get to extend their loot pool out to office, but then they also get to pick and choose a fight with someone who is less prepared for it. This team up at Spire had already just fought, so they move up and they take the fight beautifully. They find different angles, they collapse on the team really quickly, and they finish them off before the fights even really started. Beautifully done. We'll go into a little bit more depth about how they finished this fight so quickly in mid-game, but I think the first thing to note is how easy it was for Ceice to disengage really well here, but then engage really well as well. That's something that's awesome for a good IGL to have, the disengage and then engagement knowledge. So they set themselves up really well going into early mid-game here with 7 kills as second zone is closing, and they pull zone after zone. The good thing about watching them fight mid-game is you see a lot of really good fundamentals. Angles, teamwork, isolation and collapse are the big 4 pillars of mid-game fighting for me, and they show them off really nicely. Get good angles, they collapse on an isolated person and work as a team. It's really well played, but I think the mid-game is where we start to see the wheels come off here. As we go through the rest of these zones here, I'm going to point out some of the issues, and we're going to come back to these as we move into the end game. Now, unfortunately, this is one of those times where having a really good understanding of zones and how people congest in certain ways is really important. So I'm going to flash the zones up one by one and have a little discussion about the people clustering in certain areas and why they are there. So with zone 1, they get zoned right on their heads. You can't ask for a better zone than this. From here, they should be thinking long term, setting themselves up on a good hill to get good surge and move on from there. Instead, they find surge early, which essentially means they should sit deep, find central second, and then work for third off of that. Now, as zone 2 comes up, it's right on their heads again. Straight away, they should be thinking the same thing. Look for an elevated position, play to it, make sure the surge is sorted. They don't necessarily need to do that, so instead I'll be looking to get deeper. I'll be looking to make the worst case rotation or a rotation further into zone much easier, which is exactly what happens in third zone. In third zone, it pulls so far in that the clustering that happens is really important. Now, this is where I'm going to break down a little bit of the clustering for you. We see clustering happening at retail. I call this POI clustering. This happens at basically any POI in any set of zones. People feel safe there. They want to go. They want to refarm. They want to potentially find some extra loot. And then, of course, you've got clustering at the Spire. Why are people gathering there? Because they need surge. They want to find a high point that they can shoot people down on low from, finding easy surge. So you're going to get clustering at that high point and in that POI. So if you're looking to play Extreme Isolationist, when in an FNCS lobby, if you've got surge already sorted like these guys do, you should be trying to pull yourself out of those areas as much as possible, and this was a perfect opportunity for them to sit at the top of one of those hills on the right there. If they'd have done that, they wouldn't have found themselves in the situation that you see them in now, where they're basically getting suffocated out, and I think the real issue was them sitting in that house in retail for far too long. If they hadn't have done that, and they cleared that congestion, they'd played to one of those hills early, they would have found this rotation and the issues that stemmed off of this basically non-existent. They would have already had zone. What you've got to be thinking about in your rotation is mitigating the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario here was a zone that pulled all the way onto the hills and not being able to rotate out of either one of those clusters because there are too many people around you. If there are lots of people around you, rotation is harder because you've got to burn mats, because you've got to burn shield, one of the two. So pulling yourself out of that, pulling the dead side because you've got your surge sorted was 100% the play here. This is one thing that I think is really important for all good IGLs to recognize specific clustering scenarios all around the map. They happen everywhere. They're quite niche. So if you learn that sort of stuff and get really good at recognizing it, you can find yourself not on the brink and not in these situations. If you enjoy the content, guys, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.